Okay guys, this video is made for educational and entertainment purposes under the fair use guidelines on YouTube. Postscript, my English is not the best, since it's not my native language, but I hope it can be understood and I apologize for any inconvenience. Man, I think what really scares us in a movie is that slow burning terror that's right there in plain sight, not those cheap fucking jumpscares. Okay, sorry about that. I mean, sure, you get a quick fright from a ship of jumpscare is you threw in, but after a few minutes or seconds, you are back to normal. But the real fear is built slowly, and according to Hitchcock, tension grows when the audience knows something the protagonist doesn't. That waiting, that uncertainty, it's what truly scares us. It's like a rubber band that stretches and stretches until BAM! And there are films that pull this off amazingly, like Stanley Kubrick's The Shining. When Wendy arrives and observes the typewriter, a low-angle shot is used. This type of angle is usually associated with empowering the character, which might initially make us think that Wendy is in control of the situation. However, the reality is different. The true visual weight falls on the typewriter. The typewriter occupies the foreground, while Wendy remains in the midground and the hotel extends into the background. The visual composition shifts the focus toward the typewriter, as if the point of view of the shot belongs to it. Parce, la verdad es que hablar en inglés para una persona que no habla inglés es muy complicado. O sea, creo que utilizaré inteligencia artificial a partir de ahora. Pero prometo que en los próximos videos que haga, verdaderamente me esforzaré para poder hablar en inglés.
Instead of perceiving Wendy as empowered, we see her as subordinate, almost trapped by the dominant presence of the typewriter. The typewriter thus becomes another character within the scene, an element that, in a few seconds, will reveal Jack's mental state. From this moment on, a sense of tension begins to build and will only continue to increase. In other words, Wendy is not observing the typewriter. The typewriter is observing her. Finally, Jack enters the scene. Up to this point, we, Wendy, and Jack know that Jack is crazy because of what he has written on the typewriter, but this is where information is hidden from us. The viewer knows that Jack is after Wendy, but Wendy does not know this, giving rise to Hitchcock's opening statement. For this reason, and the combination of all of the above, this scene is so terrifying. All right, now I want us to take a look at the second scene. It's from Insidious, but we could also break down a specific scene from The Conjuring 2, the one where the demon Valak shows up. And honestly, it's not a coincidence that these two scenes feel so similar. You're seeing them right here side by side, and they're basically the same. And yeah, that's because both movies were directed by James Wan. And over here, we absolutely love James Wan's films. So when we look at them side by side, I think it's pretty obvious they share the same visual language, a very specific cinematic language, especially when it comes to one key thing, how they handle tension. Now, this is where it gets interesting because we kind of move away from the classic idea of suspense from Alfred Hitchcock. Like I mentioned at the beginning of the video, Hitchcock says that to create tension, the audience needs to know something the main character doesn't. In other words, there's this informational advantage that creates anxiety. We're aware of the danger before they are, and that's what keeps us on edge. But in this case, it's actually different. Here, both the audience and the main character basically have the same information. We know something's about to happen because we're literally looking at these two creepy ghost-like figures. One is the boy, the other is the nun. So the protagonist kind of senses what's coming, and that intuition is what builds the tension. It's not about hidden information, it's about anticipation. It's what Quentin Tarantino talks about, like a rubber band that keeps stretching and stretching, and that stretch, that waiting, that's what's truly terrifying. In this case, James Wan builds that sense of waiting through some very specific tools. First, the visual composition. We see claustrophobic spaces, narrow hallways, door frames that box the characters in, shots that literally limit the space around them. Visually, the character looks trapped. There's no way out, no sense of openness. The frame itself tells us there's no escape. The second point, and honestly, I'd say it's even more important than the visual composition when it comes to building tension, is the editing. In commercial cinema, we're used to really quick shots. 1 second, 2 seconds, maybe 3 at most. But here, the shots linger. They last longer than what feels normal. In other words, we're being forced to stare at a situation we might not even want to look at. We're made to wait. And that waiting, that's exactly where the tension starts to tighten. And what's really interesting is the rhythm. As we get closer to the jump scare, the shots stretch out more and more. They become uncomfortably long. You can feel it dragging in the best and worst way. Then, suddenly, they start getting shorter. Each cut comes faster than the last. The tension tightens, compresses, like it's being squeezed, until finally the scare hits. But here's the funny, or maybe ironic, part. The final jump scare isn't actually what's the scariest. If anything, it almost feels like relief. Like a release of all that built-up tension. Because what really makes us anxious isn't the scare itself. It's the time we spend waiting for it to happen. That stretch of anticipation is way more unsettling than the payoff. And what's even more interesting is that this doesn't work through a sudden, out-of-nowhere shock. It works by giving us the information right from the start. The horror is already there, right in front of us. We can see it with our own eyes, and that's exactly why it's so disturbing.
Okay. 1 moment, please. Before we continue with the video, I want to take a moment to say that this video is sponsored by me. If you'd like to support my dream of getting a professional setup for my short films, you can contribute it via donations in the link in the description. Any amount, for $1 to whatever you can. My goal is to raise $20,000 so I can buy a full professional kit, camera, light, sound, and launch my production company to put I'll be learning into practice. Thanks so much.
Now, in this scene from It Chapter 2, the horror is slow. From the moment the door opens and the shadows start to appear, the tight framing creates this feeling of confinement and instability. The old woman's figure comes across as this vague, unsettling threat, something we never fully see clearly. And meanwhile, Beverly is visually trapped inside the frame, almost like the space itself is closing in on her, pressing in from all sides. When Beverly walks in and picks up the letter from her childhood, the staging becomes incredibly precise. The shot is layered in a way that separates her from the danger. She stays in the foreground, completely unaware, while in the background the threat appears framed by the doorway, pulling our eyes straight toward it. The audience understands what's happening before Beverly does, and that gap in information is exactly what creates the tension. The scene keeps moving, and then we get to the cookies part. By that point, the suspicion is already there. The flies reinforce this idea of decay and death, hinting that something is definitely not what it seems. The shot deliberately lingers, just like in The Conjuring and Insidious, stretching the wait past the point of comfort. There's this moment where the old woman stands completely still for several seconds, and we're bracing for the jump scare that never comes. At least not when we expect it. The tension becomes almost unbearable until it's finally revealed that the figure in the photographs is Pennywise. Revealing it that way makes us realize Beverly is truly in danger, even though the threat is now hiding in the shadows, waiting. And that leaves all of us completely on edge, holding our breath. When the attack finally happens, it almost feels like a break, like a release. The real horror wasn't in the jump scare itself, it was in the waiting. In that stretched out moment where we knew something was coming, and there was absolutely nothing we could do to stop it.